I'm not necessarily a subscriber to the dead internet theory. You know, the whole idea that everything that happens on the internet is either you interacting with accounts that don't represent real people or you're interacting with accounts that represent a certain interest and not necessarily the person behind the account. But I do think, particularly on the second part of that, there is a lot more of that goes on than most people realize. Now, obviously, there are those people that are conspiracy theorists that think it happens with everybody. In particular, anytime I take any sort of weird stance or stance on a more controversial topic, there will be a collection of people that will assume that I have been paid off. And while that is incorrect, because I am too insignificant to be paid off, there are definitely people out there that are. Those emails happen, those DMs happen. The money changes hands. And in the instance that we're going to talk about, I don't even necessarily think, it's not illegal, at least. I don't think it's illegal. I think it's obvious. I think everybody's doing it, and we shouldn't necessarily be surprised. Now, the headline that got my attention jumped out at me while I was having a little Reddit scroll, and that was this post. A Twitter account was recently approached by a PR agency to run a paid campaign in favor of Ousmane Dembele's Ballon d'Or run, which, yeah, that shit happens. It's not even that weird. When I was growing up in the United States, college football is obviously a big thing, talking American football here, and the award, the Ballon d'Or in that sport, is called the Heisman Trophy. Players that are potentially going to win the Heisman Trophy, the schools they play for will mail out hype packets, informational packets to the different voters, right? They will literally mail information like attempting to convince them. I'm sure they're calling them as well, right? Getting in touch with these voters to try to convince them that their player, their guy, is the guy that should win. And to be frank, the Ballon d'Or is a way bigger deal than the Heisman Trophy. Right? And so way before the age of social media, if you had a player that was a contender for the Ballon d'Or, I would not have been surprised at all if mail was exchanged, if phone calls were exchanged consistently to try and recruit voters. It's lobbying. This shit happens in governments all the time. Right? If you ever wondered what a lobbyist does, they take these people out to dinner. They call them. In some cases, they pay them off. Right? Those cases often can be incredibly exciting. And then, there's a giant news story, and then all of a sudden a fantastic movie starring some deep cut actor that you've recognized from some TV show way back in the day who knows how to play a really intense, up against the grain investigative reporter running out of time. You get the general idea. Except this is not politics. This is just a popularity contest. Which is what the Ballon... Now, there's weird twists and turns with this in particular. This story is wild. Like, you feel like you know what's happened 3 or 4 times, then all of a sudden you don't. Not the least of which because voting closed 2.5 weeks ago, and this email apparently was last week. That's the first weird twist in this. It is not the last. But I'm making my surface argument before we actually dive into all that weird shit, which is that this stuff has been happening since the Ballon d'Or existed. It is a vote of people. And those people, there's not a ton of them, can be persuaded. They can be called. They can be emailed. They can be taken out to lunch. Right? Even if they're not technically allowed to do that, which to be perfectly honest, I don't even know what the rules are there, but I don't care enough to look them up because the Ballon d'Or is not nearly as important as it pretends to be. Right? It's social media in a lot of ways has amplified the importance of the Ballon d'Or because now you have a bunch of 12-year-olds with nothing better to do arguing about who has more Ballon d'Ors, often for players that they weren't even old enough to watch, or they'd never even heard of until they Googled how many Ballon d'Ors do these people have. Right? But it is used as this kind of honestly, the reason it's used is because it's just one thing with a pretty significant history. It is a single thing instead of trying to weigh how important league titles are, Champions Leagues are, goals are, goal contributions are. You can just point at that one thing. Be like, look how many times he won this thing. That's why Real Madrid's so emotionally invested in it. Because it has that hype machine, PR machine boost. And that's why people have been trying to bribe the voters either with time and attention or actual bribes since the thing started. And with social media, that doesn't change. If you are a smart PR person working for Ousmane Dembele in this case, you would be doing a disservice to your client if you were not trying to recruit people to amplify the idea that Ousmane Dembele is Ballon d'Or worthy, right? The person that they attempted to bribe is a guy named Neil Gardner. I don't really know who he is, but he runs he's, I think, some sort of football journalist, runs a Twitter account with nearly 170,000 followers, and he got this email, right? I'm going to pull this email up. Dear Neil, hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out on behalf of Blank International. Very poorly done blot out job there. With a potential collaboration we believe aligns closely with your voice and influence in football journalism. We're exploring a 1-month campaign designed to spark dialogue and strengthen the narrative around Ousmane Dembele's candidacy for the Ballon d'Or. Specifically, we would like to propose 3 carefully crafted tweets per week over the course of a month that highlight his performance, his impact, and overall case for recognition. Given your credibility and reach within the football community, your involvement would add meaningful weight to this conversation. At this stage, we'd like to request your quotations for this engagement, which, as a native English speaker, instant notification that this is written by somebody who is not a native English speaker. Your quotations for this engagement is what Google Translate would tell you you're supposed to say there. How much money do you want for this is anyways. As somebody that gets these emails all the fucking time, not these sorts of emails, but just emails of like, hey, you want to sponsor our like moist critical face-shaped vibrator? How much money would you ask for that, right? It's late. I don't know why that was the first thing that came to my mind. Do you think that exists? It probably exists, right? That probably exists. Anyways, we also ask that you treat this initiative with the utmost confidentiality, as discretion is essential for success. That is a mistake. You can tell that they have not emailed a lot of people to this, because if you ask people for the utmost discretion, they're going to know they're holding on to something secretive, like our friend Neil Gardner here has noticed, and you can get a lot of clout by tweeting it out. You got a bunch of likes and all this stuff. Now, they very quickly tracked down the company. It's called Banger International, a next-gen, you're going to love the buzzwords in this shit, next-gen marketing, advertising, and content powerhouse, redefining ultra-luxury brand storytelling. This is the vocal equivalent of the dude that ducks his face in Saratoga sparkling water. That's exactly what this is, but just in words. The email was sent from the company's main account and had the name of the founder, Ali Hussein, at the bottom, but they reached out to the company, and apparently they had nothing to do with it. Ali Hussein said they had nothing to do with it. It was an 18-year-old intern that was taking some initiative on their free time, right? They also reached out to Ousmane Dembele's camp, who denied it, right? And my initial instinct is to look at this and say, well, obviously, Ousmane Dembele's camp is going to attempt to outsource this because it's super embarrassing if it blows back on you that you're involved in this. Doesn't matter if it's Ousmane Dembele's camp or any one of the players that's trying to win the award this year, right? You can't, if you get an email that blows back on you that's like, hi, I am Ousmane Dembele, please post my highlight, right? It's going to be terrible. It's going to be a PR nightmare. It's going to be the opposite of what you were attempting to achieve with this stuff. So I wouldn't have been surprised if they tried to distance it going through Banger International, but then Banger International had their own story. An unnamed, this is from the article on The Athletic, an unnamed 18-year-old intern was acting without the knowledge or authority of her bosses, and noted a previous tweet from Gardner saying he was open to new work. Why did she take it upon herself? Out of curiosity, it is said. Now, that might sound stupid, but there's actually a believable reason here. To find out how much a football writer with a substantial social media following might charge for... she was doing market research. This was a market research email. Pretty poorly written one. If it was trying to achieve the goal here, obviously blew back on the company in a massive way, but not a terrible idea, right? And if you are somebody that's 18, that's an intern at a company that is doing market research on this sort of shit, you imagine how often this happens if you're doing market research on it? See, the way this would actually work is, hey, we have a confidential opportunity on behalf of such and such. You have to sign this NDA before we tell you what it is. That's how that actually works, right? This is obviously an 18-year-old intern who maybe heard about stuff like this, obviously had come across it in her work life at some points. and decided she was going to do market research on what it would take to get a football writer, right? That would be a different level of credibility. Also, a guy that's a noted Barcelona fan, apparently. So if he's tweeting about Dembele, that would apparently give it even more credibility. But if you're doing market research on this, there is a market that exists for it, right? They just went about it in the wrong way, and so it blows up. And The Athletic, of course, knows that they now have a tremendous headline that they can run with and get people to click on. And then I suppose in the trickle-down effect at the bottom of the ocean, right down in the Marianas Trench where I am, you can have somebody like me talking about this story as well. So congratulations to The Athletic on that. You're probably going to get at least one new subscriber from watching this video. As a student passionate about football advertising and digital content, the intern noticed Mr. Gardner's recent post discussing collab inquiries. This sparked an idea to conduct personal research into how influencer journalists structure partnerships for brand promotions, specifically within the football industry. I mean, honestly, pretty good idea. Feel bad for the intern. Definitely fired now. The incident has highlighted a need for us to improve our internal guidance and oversight. No shit. They apologized to Mr. Gardner for the misunderstanding and any personal inconvenience caused. They also extended their apology to Ousmane Dembele, who obviously is now getting his name kind of dragged through the mud. But the funniest part of all of this, to go back to something I said earlier, is that the window closed at the end of August, which means this email, which went out Friday, like a week ago, is... Yeah, there was no point at all. Like, if you're the Gardner guy, you should have known this was bullshit the moment you got it, because there's no voters to influence. All you'd be influencing is the social discussion, which would still be valuable, but not nearly as valuable. You wouldn't be creating the same kind of momentum that perhaps you would hope to create. So if you ever see somebody, Fabrizio Romano, tweeting about somebody a lot, when you start to get that spidey sense that maybe they shouldn't be, trust the spidey sense, because they getting paid. Now, I'm not hating on anybody getting a bag, but it is a pretty nefarious way to get a bag to try and build trust from people and then abuse it in order to get money by saying things you don't actually believe. You make the argument that maybe you believe it and you're just tweeting it out anyways, but how many times does somebody really need to tweet about Mason Greenwood? I don't know.